It is Christmas morning, December 25th, 2022, and I woke up feeling truly blessed. I don't know about you, but I woke up feeling so blessed for everything that money can't buy and everything that money can buy. I feel truly blessed today, and I wanted to make today's episode about a lesson that really hit home for me. Just some of the things that I've been processing in my own personal journey of manifesting my ideal state, manifesting my ideal state of all of my desires fulfilled. And I'll talk a little bit about that later in the podcast. But today's podcast, I wanted to make it about the stories that we tell. And I first found myself making a declaration that I was no longer going to tell the stories in my life that no longer serve me. I was no longer going to tell stories that does not support the version of me that aligns with what I am moving forward with. And I was having a conversation with somebody about this, because what we don't realize is we are the sum of the stories we tell, right? Like, we draw something from every single story that we tell about the things that happened in our lives. Some of those stories that we tell are charged with emotions, right? Like, some of them are not great stories. Some of them are traumatic. Some of them didn't have happy endings. Some of them, we don't realize that, regardless of what the story is, we ultimately are the sum of the stories we tell. And so, in understanding how this manifestation thing works when it comes to what you give your attention to and what you are keeping vibrationally relevant in your reality, it behooves you to understand that sometimes the stories we're telling are not helpful in our journeys, right? Like, some of the stories we're holding on to are not supporting what it is that we're creating. And I think that when I became aware of this, it was very illuminating. It was very, it was an aha moment for me, because little by little, I started to recognize the stories that I had been telling that were literally getting in the way. For example, we got to be mindful about how we label ourselves and what we call ourselves, because for every label that you give yourself and every title or label that you give yourself comes with a whole identity. It comes with a whole role that you will then need to play out because you gave yourself that label. For example, if you are somebody who labeled yourself as a slow learner, right? And the story that you've been telling is that maybe in elementary school, they put you in classes because you took a little bit longer to read than your peers did. And so from that moment on, you've gone about your life labeling yourself as a slow learner. Man, when you look at what has unfolded for you because of that label that you've given yourself, you may come to find that you've put yourself in limiting positions for most of your life, if not all of your life, because of that one label. You avoided certain things because of that one label. You wouldn't allow yourself to shine in certain ways because of that one label. You looked at that one label as a hindrance to, your growth and a hindrance to your success in other areas of your life. And I use that example, but there's another example in one of my favorite books that you'll find me recommended from time to time. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell C. Maltz. And in that book, he talks about labels. He talks about how he gave an example of a kid who got some kind of scores on the SAT. Like the kid scored super high on the SAT when they got their test results. And from that experience, they went on to become super successful in college. And then they went on to have a super successful career. And then they went on to win all kinds of accolades and awards. And then somehow, some way, later in their journey, they got an email from the board of like the SAT. And I'm framing this as the SAT, but it was some other kind of standardized test. But they got their results back, and come to find out, the test scores had been mixed up. And that particular kid did not get the highest score. As a matter of fact, that particular kid had gotten the lowest scores. But the irony is that before that kid took the test back in the day, they were not one of the most top performing students. They were maybe a C, D student, sometimes an F student. And the minute they took the test, they got these high scores. Their parents couldn't believe it. Their parents were like, there must have been a fucking mistake. Excuse my language. There must have been some kind of mistake, right? But up until that point, that student was just like an average student, carrying themselves in a very average way, right? Like they weren't used to being recognized for anything special. Even their parents were just like, yeah, that must be a mistake. But what it did for that student to carry the label of one of the highest test scores in the country is it elevated that student's thinking about possibility for themselves. That became their new story. They were no longer considering themselves to be average or sub-average. They were now considering themselves to be successful, a success, very smart. And so they carried themselves the way that they saw themselves now through this new story, through this new label of pretty much a genius, right? Like if you score some of the highest scores in the country for a standardized test, I would consider you like, somebody who thinks maybe you're genius level, perhaps, because those tests aren't easy if we're honest. But that person then carried themselves with an air of success. They strived for higher things, and they put themselves in position to do harder things, and they accomplished thing after thing after thing and made themselves successful, right? And I think it was just that one thing that was the catalyst. And then fast forward to when they get the news that the test scores were wrong. They had gotten mixed up. They weren't even their test scores. By that point, they didn't give a damn about the test scores, but they did care about the fact that the test scores was the turning point for them. That was the turning point in their journey where they switched something switched off from average to excellence for them, right? And I thought that was just such a beautiful example, because it goes to show that the stories we tell about ourselves, what we attach to as part of our identity, plays out in our everyday lives, right? And it could be something that actually happened to you, right? And no one's denying that whatever that thing was, whatever happened, no one's denying that it didn't happen. But what I'm wanting to bring to your awareness is that it may not serve you to continue to tell it, especially if you no longer identify with it. There are many people who have things in their past that they may or may not be proud of, right? And it's not to say, that those things didn't happen, but they may or may not be proud of those things. Those things come with certain emotions. Those things come with certain labels. And every single time they replay those memories, or every single time they identify themselves with the labels from those experiences, they are literally reactivating those things in the present moment. And if we understand what we're doing in this manifestation process, by giving our attention to something, by giving our thoughts and attention to something, by giving our thoughts and attention and emotions to something, is what crystallizes it into this physical plane. And so you can't really shake those identities and what comes with those identities if you're continuing to tell the stories that give you these labels that make you activate the identity, right? And so I am just wanting to come on and share this because I recognize how this was showing up for me in my journey. For a while, I identified as somebody, when it came to relationships, as having an abandonment style attachment, right? And I didn't realize how continuing to even say that played out in my adulthood, played out in my relationships. And it wasn't until I became aware, oh my goodness, I need to stop telling that story because I don't even identify with that. But me keeping the story alive and continuing to activate it, I am literally wearing a label and playing out a role that validates this story. And if I want to stop showing up that way, if I want to stop experiencing certain things that come with that identity, I need to stop telling that story altogether. I need to adopt a new story. And it wasn't until I did that things began to shift for me, right? Things began to shift for me because I stopped telling the story of that little girl who had that issue of feeling that way. And so when I stopped telling the story, I stopped attracting people that made me feel that way. At first, it was a little bumpy. I would still do that. I would attract people that would trigger me in that way. But I learned to work through that process and remind myself that I am no longer that. That was something that happened to that version of me in the past, but the version of me who emerged is so much more evolved, is so much more understanding of her journey and where she stands, and understanding that she cannot be abandoned. There's no such thing, right? There's no such thing as that for this version of me. And so if there's no such thing as that, then something that I could have perceived as abandonment in the past can no longer show up that way for me because I don't wear that identity anymore. Man, I really hope this message resonates with somebody, because there are so many people that I know are literally suffering in their lives because of the labels and the stories that they tell about themselves, and the labels that come with those stories, and the identity roles that have to play out for them because they continue to identify with that. If we go back to that example with the kid who had the test scores, I mean, can you imagine if that kid had never had those high test scores, the things they would have never accomplished because they never identified with being a winner. They never identified with being the smartest person in the room. Can you imagine what that did for them? Put yourself in their shoes and say, if I got those scores when I'm going into certain rooms, or, you know how some people shrink when it comes to public speaking, or they hear ideas tossed out and they have the most brilliant ideas, but because they don't believe in themselves, they don't speak up. Can you imagine how that kid's confidence switched from being that person that would shrink to being the person that probably raises their hands first? Can you see how that might have made them, stand a little bit taller? Their posture, may have made them a lot more confident, even when it came to dating. Can you just imagine how that new identity might have played out for them day to day and decade to decade? Even in the workforce, if they didn't start out being really good at a particular role, they had enough confidence in themselves because they're well, if I got these test scores and I just went in and took the test and I'm the smartest person, I'm smarter than the average, then this is a piece of cake. Because let me tell you something about life. What you tell yourself is true for you. What you tell yourself is true for you. If you believe you can, you can. If you believe you can't, you can't. Because your belief is what will guide your actions. Your belief is what will guide your perception and your ability to see what's possible. If you don't believe you can do something, you will not even see an opportunity right in front of you, because you will not wear the identity of the one who can recognize that opportunity. Man, this is so deep. It's so deep, y'all. It's so deep. And that's why I had to hop on Christmas Day to share this message of minding the stories we tell. Mind your stories. No one is denying that things happened. No one's denying that. Your truth is your truth. But I will tell you this. If the story that you are holding on to is no longer your truth, let it go, sis. Let it go, bruh. Let that shit go, because it is no longer valid for you in your next journey. It's the thing that's holding you back. Likely, it is likely holding you back, because for every story comes the labels, the labels, the labels, the labels, and we play out the role of those labels. we play out the roles of those labels. I remember I had a friend, and I'm not going to go too deep about it because I don't know who's listening to this, but I remember having a friend who, when I was in grade school, who labeled themselves as slow, right? They labeled themselves as slow learners because, throughout their childhood, they were in certain courses, they struggled with reading and things like that. And they used to label themselves as a slow learner. And that went from how, as early as that happened for them, through high school. And I remember when I was actually applying to go to college, that friend was actually in the same process, like applying to go to college. And I remember they used to say a lot of defeating things as they were going through the process with me. They were like, oh, I'm enrolled, but I got to go through remedial courses because, I'm slow. And I remember them saying this all the time. And then fast forward, I probably finished my first or second year of college, and I ended up meeting back up with that friend, and that particular friend had dropped out. And they dropped out, and it wasn't a shock to me because I remember how much they struggled, right? But I also, at the time, had an awareness that part of that struggle was because of the story that they constantly told themselves, I'm slow. I can't get this like other people. Like, remember, for every negative thought, there's a bunch of other thoughts behind it. There's no such thing as just thinking one negative thought. If you think I'm ugly, there's a bunch of other negative thoughts behind ugly. That person's more attractive than me. That person, the guy that I like is probably going to like somebody prettier than me. Like, there's a bunch of other thoughts behind the one thought. So if I can only imagine that if she was thinking, or that friend was thinking that they're slow, there's a bunch of other thoughts behind that. And imagine the things that they kept themselves from experiencing. Imagine the opportunities they kept themselves from going after because of that identity, because of the label, because of the stories that are very well valid. They did happen, right? But we didn't know back then that we had the ability to create our realities based on our beliefs. We didn't know what any of this stuff that I talk about on this podcast. We didn't have a lot of this information, especially not growing up. Most of us didn't have this kind of information in our households, not to the extent to which we can click on a video on YouTube or pop on my podcast and listen to. We didn't have this information. And so I just want you to take a moment. If you're listening to this podcast, take a moment to either journal or just sit with yourself in meditation, or, just sit with yourself and think about the stories that you have been telling probably for a very long time, that you are now aware. These stories do not serve me. This story that I'm telling, it comes with a particular label that is no longer beneficial for me to tell. And I'm going to tell you, as you sit with the stories and recognize whether or not they are beneficial to your journey and your next level, I also want you to understand that you can let go of those stories and you can replace them with new stories, right? You can replace them with new stories of your newfound awareness. Tell the story of what you wish to be. Neville says this all the time, and I think the Bible actually mentions it. Let the sick man say, I am well. Let the poor man say, I am rich. Let the weak say, I am strong. And this is not just some esoteric hocus pocus stuff. It's true. When you make a declaration of what will be now, right? Because the word I am implies that you are it now. You are declaring it now, not in the future, not I will be well. You're saying I am well. Let the weak say I am strong. Let the poor say I am rich. You are wearing a new identity. And with that new identity, obviously will come new stories. Now, granted, you may not have experienced what it's like to be rich. And if you're sick, you may not remember what it's like to be well, but you can, right? You can. You may not If you're weak, you may not have the recollection of being strong, but you can, right? You can build these new stories. You can build them with your intention. If you have the intention to be wealthy, you set out your intention, and then you allow your actions to be guided by that intention. You go read some books, you take some courses, you practice with the money that you are getting, practice a budget, practice growing your money with investments, practice, put yourself in the mind frame of the one who is wealthy. The same with the weak. If you're weak and you don't have recollection of being strong, listen, use your imagination. Let your imagination take you there. You don't even have to fully take full-fledged action. Sometimes it's just a matter of allowing yourself to see it, right? Imagine it. Imagine yourself, if you are in bed, frail and weak, imagine yourself lifting a 50-pound dumbbell, right? Imagine yourself in the gym, weightlifting and weight training. Imagine yourself standing in the mirror with muscles. Imagine it, right? The same for somebody who's not had a healthy relationship. If you've never had it, so you don't have the recollection of it, that's fine, right? But set your intention. I want to have a healthy relationship. And then sit with yourself and say to yourself, what does that look like? What exactly does that look like? How am I engaging with my love if I'm in this healthy connection? And allow yourself to go there. Allow yourself to imagine it, because one of the beautiful things about the human mind, the subconscious mind, is that it does not know the difference between an experience that is real or an experience that is imagined. That is how our memory works. We can literally recall something that happened 10 years ago, and your body in this moment will not know the difference. Your body won't know that you're not experiencing it. It's the reason why we can wake up in sweats from a nightmare that we might have the night before. You wake up from a dream that's awful, and your heart's racing, and you're sweating, and your palms are clammy. That's not a coincidence. Your brain doesn't know you're not having that experience. Your brain thinks you're in it, right? And that's the beauty of the human mind. When you conjure up a vision, whether it's an actual memory or something that you're making up on the spot, your body doesn't know the difference. And that's a beautiful thing, because if your body doesn't know the difference, that means you are conditioning your body to a new story every time you imagine what it is you are trying to create. So every time you allow yourself to go there in imagination, you are allowing yourself to go into the future, and your body doesn't know you're not experiencing it. And the same with the past. Every time you conjure up a memory of a story that doesn't serve you, you're activating that in your body in this moment, and your body doesn't know that it's not happening. And your body draws to you experiences that continue to match whatever you keep telling. If you keep saying, oh, I'm so tired of being broke, and I'm broke, and I'm broke, and I'm broke, your body doesn't know that you're not broke. Your body is like, okay, we broke. And so what we're learning through this manifestation journey is not just the esoteric and the spiritual part of it. We're learning that scientifically, human beings are electromagnetic species. We are drawing to us the things that vibrate on the same frequency of what we are emitting. And if you're telling a certain story and it's causing you to feel a certain way, and you're putting that kind of energy out into the universe every single day by activating it, by keeping it alive, keeping your attention there, your thoughts there, and your emotions there, you are literally activating a vibration, or you're keeping a vibration consistent, right? You're keeping that vibration consistent, that frequency consistent. And if it's not what you want to continue to create, you got to stop telling the same story. And as Joe Dispenza, I love Joe Dispenza's meditations, and I love his teachings, because what he tries to get you to do is he tries to get you to live from a vision of the future instead of the memories of the past. Most of us are stuck on the memories of the past, and that's why we keep finding ourselves in this loop. It's like a loop effect. We feel like we're living the same days over and over again, right? Very subtle changes, but every single day seems like this is a pattern. This is a cycle, right? And that's because we are living from the memories of our past instead of allowing ourselves to live from the vision of the future. And so this is what I wanted to get to. This is what I wanted to drive home, is that it's so important to mind your stories. Create new visions for yourself so that you can support the new story that you want to tell. If you were weak, let the weak man say, I am strong. And then from that space of strength, start telling stories of strength. And if you don't have any physical stories to share, then imagine it. And then as you imagine it, go try to put yourself to the test and demonstrate some of the things that you're imagining. Take the action of the version of you that you imagined. Even if it's small steps. Let's say you can't lift 50 pounds yet, but you can lift a 5-pound weight. Well, that's a start. In your physical reality, when we talk about whether or not to take action when it comes to manifestation, of course you're going to take action. You're going to naturally be drawn to do the things that align with your vision. So anybody that's telling you, oh, you don't have to lift a finger, and sometimes you won't. Some things will just come by osmosis, the things that you don't have resistance to. But the average things will require you to become something different. The average things that you're wanting will require you to make shifts in your life, and you're going to be inspired to naturally do things, right? You're going to be inspired to naturally show up a particular way. If you want to be more attractive, you're naturally going to do things to make yourself more attractive. So that is taking action, guys. It's not rocket science. We will need to, take action. There's no such thing as just shit just falling in your lap without any effort on your part. You're going to have to go there in imagination. You're going to have to tell the new stories. You're going to have to wear the new labels, and then allow those labels and identities from the story to guide your actions, to lead you down the path of what you would do if that were true, to lead you down the path of embodying the state of your wish fulfilled, rather than living from the memories of your past, which are not what you want to continue to create. So again, I hope this message really resonates with someone out there, because it's a lesson that I keep revisiting, because again, it's a journey, right? Like if you've practiced something over time, it doesn't just go away out of the blue. You got to continue to redirect your thoughts, especially if you're used to thinking about it, right? You got to learn how to redirect to something different, redirect to the new intention, redirect to the new story, redirect to the new identity, the new version of you that has this awakened awareness to something different, right? And so that is what I wanted to share. I'm going to keep revisiting this, because I'm on this journey just like every single one of you listening. And, we're going to be on this journey until we die. This is a lifestyle. Once your eyes are opened, what do they say? The whole Pandora's box. Once Pandora's box is open, there's no closing it. Once your eyes are open to this knowledge, to this information of self-exploration, you're never going to close the box again. And you're never going to be blind to your power, your ability to create your reality. You can never turn your eyes off once your eyes are open to that. So with that being said, I wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas. This was a message that felt like a gift to me, a download that I received early morning that I knew I wanted to share. And it just so happened to be on Christmas Day. So I'm just going to claim that Christ is all up in this message, because, he wants us to know ourselves. He wants us to be aware and awaken to what he knew, as a son of God, that we are children of God and we are of God. And he wanted us to wake up to that. And I'm so blessed that I've gotten the lessons from Christ, and I've gotten them from so many other people who are also teachers of the divine. And I'm very grateful. And so whatever you celebrate, whether it's Christmas, whatever your faith may be, happy holidays to anybody listening. Because again, I don't just appeal to Christians or whatever. This is a very universal topic, but you can apply it in a way that you understand it for your journey. And so have a blessed holiday, everyone. May you be surrounded by love, wishing you peace, prosperity, and all the things that your heart desires. Peace out, y'all.